Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome into another PTN Extra. I told you last week was going to be Mike and I's last week doing this together. I lied, so don't listen to me ever again. But what you should listen to me about is today, because it is quite a day. 2024 National Signing Day is well underway. We're recording this around 3:50, 4 o'clock. So whatever news breaks after it, we'll get this online as quickly as we can. But if there's news that breaks after this, you will have all of that over on our website. For now, let's talk about what has broke at 3:50 p.m. on Wednesday, December 4th. Mike, it was kind of a quiet day for Arkansas. Everybody this morning thought that the number one thing that Arkansas would get was Tavian Wallace, the linebacker out of Georgia. Got a little bit of a scare because he was pulling some Florida gear on earlier this morning, but he committed to Arkansas. And then around a half hour or an hour ago, assistant quarterbacks coach Miles Fishback tweeted, "Get your popcorn out." And why, you might ask? Well, here's why. We'll pop up the graphic. Arkansas was able to make a major acquisition, flipping Madden Iamaleava, a four-star quarterback from California, decommitted from UCLA, the number 6 dual threat QB in the entire country. If that name sounds familiar, Iamaleava, well, we've seen his brother so far this season, Nico, at Tennessee. They were able to flip him and his number 1 wide receiver from high school, Jace Brown, a wide receiver. He is also coming to the Hill. So that happened about a half hour ago. Major news coming out of California, and those guys are now officially going to be Arkansas Razorbacks. A huge get for Sam Pittman, Bobby Petrino, and company. We'll break all that down in a second. To look at some of the other guys that Arkansas landed, Jaden Shelton, number 14, inside linebacker in the class of 2025. He's a 3-star. We'll take a look at some of the other top signees per On3 Sports right here. We've already mentioned a little bit about Tavian Wallace, 4-star linebacker from Georgia. Then you have Grayson Wilson, which now becomes really interesting. We'll break down all of that quarterback stuff coming up. He is out of North Little Rock, Arkansas, 89.22 rating. The number 2 recruit in Arkansas coming to the Hill per ESPN, Reginald Vaughn. Right after him, 3-star defensive lineman, Jakaden Ferguson, a 3-star wide receiver out of Houston. Now you pair him with Jace Brown, you're a little bit happier about replacing Andrew Armstrong. And then you also have Lionel Prudhomme on our graphic right there, interior offensive lineman, 3-star. Not to mention Quentin Murphy, a quarterback defensive tackle, the number 4 recruit in Arkansas, 3-star right there. And Scott Starzik, the number 1 kicker in the United States per Coles kicking, 5-star. Thank you for correcting me there. So a really interesting day, really interesting last 30 minutes. We're sitting over there going, what's going to happen? Courtney's doing full court press. Make sure to tune into that. And our producer walks in and says, check your phones. And we check, and it's the news about Iamaleava and Jace Brown. Let's start there, Mike. What does this mean that you're now bringing in another quarterback?
Well, let me back up a little bit and put some perspective on signing day today as opposed to the way it used to work for years. Because before the portal, it was all about your freshman signing, your high school senior signing class. There'd typically be about 25. There'd be an all-day thing, and then Pittman or the head coach would talk for about an hour, and then everybody would be going live, and they'd be talking about these guys, and they'd be going all the way down to the – look, with the portal, what matters now, and the reason I bring this up was going into today, in fact, going into just maybe a few hours ago, here's what you were getting on the internet. Well, it's the number 14th, 15th ranked class in the SEC. I don't care. This was the typical mad internet people. What they don't get is that these days, it's not where your class is ranked. It's how many guys in this high school senior class can come in and play next year, can affect something next year.
Right.
Now, maybe the quarterback, maybe that's 2 years down the road. That's still big news.
Yeah.
But there are several. Linebacker, that they got that was supposed to go
Tavian Wallace.
It was supposed to go to Florida State and didn't happen. There's some wide receivers, and they need wide receivers. So it looks like right now they're going to get some help from guys that may be able to play next year. So then we take that and we look at who's coming back.
Yeah.
Now that's going slow, but who do we have so far? You got Xavier Sori, the linebacker. Cam Ball, defensive tackle. Who else?
Fernando Carmona Jr. per his podcast.
Big. That's your top.
So that as of right now is who we know.
Yeah. But who do we not have? We don't have Taylon Green. Now, what's going on there? You would think he'd be one of the first ones.
Yeah.
Now with this news of to me, there's got to be a reason why you suddenly flipped a 4-star guy out of California that was going to you. first of all, I've got to believe they offered him some pretty good NIL money. Mm-hmm. So how did you do that, and what's the reason? And so there's a lot of speculation right now that Taylon Green might not be assured this job. Maybe he's re-looking at his options.
Yeah.
And then you bring KJ Jackson into this thing, who is a freshman this year, and keep in mind that Singleton is gone, mm-hmm. so Jackson moves up, and so KJ Jackson, a 6'4", four-star quarterback out of Georgia. Where was he from? Alabama. Yeah. Okay, I watched this guy in the spring. I mean, he's impressive. Mm-hmm. Doesn't have the all-out speed of Taylon Green, but he's fast. He's got quick feet. He's a pocket passer. He moves up in the pocket. Some of the stuff they were complaining about Taylon Green. He's got a good ability to move up into the pocket. He's got good peripheral vision. He sees the field very well. Picks out receivers. The main thing I noticed about him was in the short and intermediate passes, I thought he was the best of all the quarterbacks because he gets the ball on accurately and it's got zip on it. So if you're trying to go down the field 12 yards, 15 yards, 12 yards, 20 yards, instead of just throwing deep, he's the guy that's going to move chains. So I've been impressed with him all along. It could be that when Taylon Green went into this meeting with Sam Pittman, Pittman told him, hey, bub, you did some good things. You did some things that never corrected itself. A lot of fans are mad about this. We gotta correct these issues. And you got people behind you that are going to push you for a job. Maybe he didn't like that. I don't know. Maybe he told them we're flipping these guys, this quarterback out of California. Who knows what's going on there? But until he announces, there's still a mystery about what's going on at quarterback.
Yeah, and that's the reality of the position today. Already you see guys like Caden McNamara, who's going to leave Iowa, go elsewhere. Jackson Arnold leaving Oklahoma, going to go elsewhere, enter the portal. Could Taylon Green be the next one to go to a third school like those two other guys I mentioned? But if you look at this Arkansas signee class, before Iamaleava and Brown signed, Arkansas had 15 officially. They had 24 commits. It was 15th out of 16 in the SEC. You got to think that's going to go up. But what's really interesting is you might hear 15 out of 16 and think it's bad. The reality is Arkansas is the 30th national rank in the entire country. All the SEC teams you see, strength of schedule right now when you're talking about postseason, all of them are above 32. And recruiting, all of them are relatively probably above that same thing. Arkansas, 30th national. That's better than a lot of Big Ten schools. You have the ACC, some of those old Pac-12 schools like USC, UCLA, for example, who are now in the Big Ten. So when you put it all together, right, it's a really good sign for Arkansas because you're flipping some of these guys, and people kind of lost faith in a sense because look at the games this season when we talk about Taylon Green. Texas A&M, Oklahoma State, Missouri this past weekend, and I might be forgetting one or two, LSU as well. And you never want to say it's one guy who lost the game. But what happened in those games? Oklahoma State, Taylon Green threw a costly pick six early in the game, and the Cowboys got back into it. Ultimately, Oklahoma State was awful this year. Then you go to Texas A&M. That last drive, he had the ball in his hand to drive down the field. Fumble. Recovered by Texas A&M. Game over. Flash forward. LSU. Why did that game get out of hand, Mike? Because Taylon Green threw an interception on a screen pass. Now, was it the best play call? No. But you cannot go out there in the 5-yard line and throw an interception. LSU scored 2 plays later. And then especially this weekend against Missouri. You had the fumbles early on that gave Missouri life, 14, 17 points off turnovers for the Tigers. But at the end of the game, when it mattered, they got behind the chains almost every drive. I was filming the last play of the game, and, it just seemed like Taylon, they didn't really have any options. Taylon just kind of threw the ball up. And 34 yards, you were still short of the goal line in that throw. You had to put that ball in the end zone, give a little tip drill, give your team a chance, and they never really successfully moved the chains on that fourth drive. It took an amazing Isaac Tesla play, an amazing Andrew Armstrong play to even get you in that position. So the question now becomes, when you look at this quarterback position, what's going to happen? Is it going to be Taylon Green coming back? He'll probably have the edge on the job, but now you have one 4-star in Madden Iamaleava, and now you have Grayson Wilson, who's been committed to the Hogs for a year and a half. He's been a really solid commit for Arkansas. But now, and KJ Jackson.
You got another 4-star, probably number 2 when it starts, if Green is back.
Right.
So the quarterback room is fine. You'd still like to have your established guy, and you wish he'd had a better year, and maybe he will be better. One thing we don't know, and this is the one thing that bothers me about Sam Pittman, he never lets us talk to assistant coaches. I would have a million questions to Bobby Petrino about Taylon Green. He hasn't said squat about Taylon Green all year. We don't know what their relationship is. We don't know how he feels about Taylon. Is he high on him? Is he the one that told Pittman, you better tell this guy, We don't know. But it makes for an interesting signing day rather than what was projected this morning and up to about noon of, this is boring, don't pay any attention to this. And it's still just the first part of this, because when this is over, then if you're really a fan that wants to know how does this team get better for next year, the next thing you need to start looking at is who's coming back. And once you do that, then you start looking at the portal. And who are they bringing in? Do they bring in some defensive tackles or edge rushers out of the portal? Do they get another receiver out of the portal?
Do they get another quarterback out of the portal?
Yeah, maybe. I don't see that. A lot of people thought when Connor Wegman announced he was leaving A&M, a lot of people said, Petrino coached him. I don't think you'd have what we have right now if that was going on.
Right.
But who knows? Maybe they know Taylon Green is leaving and they're bringing him in to have a proven guy. There's just so many things we don't know right now. But to me, that's the fun part, and it's anything but boring if you know what's going on.
Right, especially in the afternoon when all these guys are finally signing and finally committing, and it's like, okay, well, we knew 80% so far, I would say, today of who was going to come to Arkansas. The last 20%, that's been the fun part. That's where you don't know because, again, these guys say they're committed. Iamaleava and Brown both were committed to UCLA, and then all of a sudden we get the alert saying, nope, they're coming to Arkansas, and we're like, we're just as shocked as everybody at home. Like, we don't have any insight on this. And to your point about talking to assistants, I think that's really interesting because we've talked about it. We talked about it last week when we were comparing Cal versus Muss last year and saying how, Cal this year lets us talk to all of his assistants, Chin Coleman, Kenny Payne. Muss last year did every press conference about himself. And again, it's also the Kirby Smart, Nick Saban mantra of we're not going to talk to assistants. We only get to talk to them I don't even think we get to talk to them in April. It's just in August. So we get to talk to these guys once a year. All we know right now from at least Bobby Petrino is he's not going to Charlotte as of today. Or is Travis Williams. They're both staying. I think that is huge to have consistency for this Arkansas team.
They're not going to flip these two quarterbacks if he's not going to be here.
Exactly.
You think they recruited them with him just standing there and saying nothing? Like, well, I can't tell you I'll be here, but yeah you ought to come here. Okay, I will. Come on.
Yeah, look, I'm only saying what's been brought up online, what people are freaking out at when they go and say, Bobby's at the Charlotte airport. There could have been a million reasons he's at the Charlotte airport. Obviously, it's pretty sure the Charlotte reason was the right one, but you never know why. But what I do want to talk about next about in-state recruiting, and I know that all of these big headlines right now, they're all from out of state. But if you look at in-state and where I think there's been a lot of discourse about this, yes, Arkansas did not land the number one prospect in-state. He went elsewhere. But the reality is, Arkansas, there's 2 in the top 10 per ESPN that have not committed yet. But Arkansas landed 4 of the top 8 guys, not to mention the number 1 quarterback in Grayson Wilson. He's the number 2 recruit per ESPN, so you can look at other places and they'll tell you something different. Of in-state recruits, only 17% of the signing class is coming in-state as of 10, 15 minutes ago when I wrote my notes down. When you take a step back and look at the reality of college football today, Are you as freaked out as maybe people who are at home saying they didn't go hard enough about Arkansas kids as maybe other people are?
No, I'm not. And I understand the theory behind that. And you've got a lot of former players saying that. Hey, these teams were always built on a strong class of Arkansas players. At times they had more than others. I would just tell you, look at Andrew Armstrong. Are you going to tell me that he came in here and didn't buy into this system and he wasn't effective because he wasn't from Arkansas? This program, I could sit here and name you great Razorback players that came out of Texas, came out of Florida, Alex Collins. You think he didn't buy into being a Razorback? You think Lloyd Phillips, who came back here and was on the national championship team from East Texas, didn't buy into he came here and then lived here the rest of his life as a school administrator. So you don't have to be from Arkansas to come in and play for this program and to buy into it and be a leader and then be a Razorback for the rest of your life. That is overblown. Every time you kind of get a rough period, that's what you hear. You don't have enough guys from Arkansas. I don't blame Pittman or say Pittman is missing out on the boat. He's trying to get the best players. A lot of people don't understand. When Bobby Petrino had his problem, and he got fired, Guess what Jeff Long knew almost immediately? He knew he had a coach out of the Big Ten that had won the Big Ten, I think 2 years running.
Yep. They were in the Big Ten
Brett
championship
Bielema.
game with Wisconsin.
That's a big-time hire.
Yeah.
Your program, oh yeah, we lost this guy, but look who we're getting. Now what happened when he left? What'd you do? You ended up with Chad Morris. And then Chad Morris, and then after that, you had to get here's what your options were after Chad Morris. Sam Pittman wanted the job, Barry Lundy Jr. wanted. All these people that say Drinkwitz wanted this job, why didn't we get him? He didn't want it. He said he didn't want it. So they didn't have options. All right. Now when you start saying 5 years later, the program's a little bit better than it was a lot better than when he took over. But you don't have all these options. If you think that Rhett Lashley's coming here, you're wrong.
Yeah.
So when you look at your athletic director, I think what he's looking at is, I like this staff. I don't think Sam Pittman is what some people say he is. He's had some issues. I think they're going to overcome these issues. Just because we went from 4 wins to 6 wins instead of, we're not the guy at Indiana that just suddenly turns them completely around. No, we don't want that. I mean, that doesn't happen very often.
No.
So if you go from 4 wins to 6 wins, 6 wins to 8 wins, and let's say he's here 2 more years, and you get to 9 wins or whatever, then you built the program back for what? Then you can hire another coach and you can get somebody.
And I want to bring up that point because you brought up Curt Cignetti right there. And obviously, as an Indiana graduate, as an Indiana fan, I'm thrilled about that. But what did Indiana have to do? Let's take a second. And when we look at kind of coaching searches right now, right? What did Indiana do? They had to reevaluate the way people in the state thought about Indiana football. Because guess what? Nobody was going to the games. Nobody cared. I probably went to maybe a handful of games in my 4 years in Indiana. The reality was Indiana had to go, and they did not make a splash hire. Do not get me wrong. Curt Cignetti turned himself into a splash hire because he walked into Indiana, looked around, and said, I need to rejuvenate these people.
Right.
Indiana did not go to big bowl games. You know, we have not, Indiana, I say we, I can say we, I'd like to think I can. Indiana hasn't won a bowl game since 1987. Right. Like, that's the reality of it. And what Curt Cignetti did there is fantastic. It's something we haven't seen, and he's now going to stay there for the long term. But the reality is, how many coaches like that do you hit on?
And
not many.
It's a once in a generation, lightning in a bottle type thing. And most fans look at that and say, well, why didn't we do that? Why can't we go find some guy that would instantly give us 9 or 10 wins? And they don't understand generally that's not how it works.
And the SEC top to bottom, and this will feed into everybody else's college football playoff ideology, is a whole lot better than the Big Ten top to bottom. In the Big Ten, Indiana isn't losing to a mediocre Big Ten team. Michigan is probably top half. That's the team they won 20-15. But they're not losing to these bottom half teams. Neither is Penn State. Neither is Ohio State. Neither is Oregon. But in the SEC, there's a lot more parity where an Arkansas team that was 4-3 at the time can go out and beat a Tennessee, or an Oklahoma who wasn't any good can beat an Alabama. That's the reality of the SEC, is it's a lot more level playing field than the Big Ten. The top 4 teams in the Big Ten are going to eat. The SEC is all around. So if you're seeing that steady improvement, 4 wins last year, if Sam Pittman doesn't hire Dan Enos, who knows if we'd be having this conversation right now, because that's what really went wrong last year.
The one bad mistake that he's made.
But he's went to, 3-4 bowl games now in 5-6 years? Right. Like, if you would tell me as an Indiana fan that Tom Allen would go to a bowl game 3 to 4 years in a 6-year span, I'd sign up for it. Right. 90% of college football fans would. The reality is in the SEC, you want to win. You're not going to catch lightning in a bottle. You need to build the program. A lot of pieces left last year. We talked about it in the beginning of the season, how different this Arkansas team was going to be this year. Now I'd like to see with the certain returners they have and some of these kids who can help out from high school, where can they go? From now, your base is 6-6. If they do worse than 6-6 next year, not to mention the schedule is harder. You will play a Memphis team that's really good as well. You'll play Arkansas State, amongst others. But the reality is, 6-6 is your baseline right now. Where do you go next year when there's going to be continuity for the first time on the offensive side of the ball in a long time?
And here's the other thing that's working in their favor. First of all, the NIL money was up for what's going to happen starting in, really it's already worked. But it's going to impact in December when this portal thing opens up in a few days.
Yeah.
So from what we're told, there's a lot more money available than there was a year ago. So we'll see what kind of an impact it has. But again, that's part of getting better next year. Is you got to have a better top to bottom class than you had now. That's how you continue to improve. But the other thing is this. The SEC is so tough right now. There's probably 10 programs right now that at any given time can beat anybody else in the league, at least 10. So you're Hunter Yurachek. You're going to get rid of Sam Pittman and you're going to hire another coach. Who wants to come here? Because you know you're going to come to a school that probably finished somewhere around 13th in the league this year, and there's 10 other teams ahead of you, and you somehow got to go past them, and you're expected to because
in year one.
In year one, and if I'm a guy that's even been considered for that job, I'm going to do what Rhett Lashley did and go, I'm staying where I am because I don't have to do these impossible things. So I think the strength of the SEC works against you when you're coming off a 4-win season and a 6-win season, which is why I said you get to 8, then maybe 9, and then he steps aside, and then you've got the ability to negotiate with somebody. They're going, this program is moving forward. Yeah, I'll pull the trigger and go there.
And potentially Travis Williams, if he's still on a couple of years, an option to eventually move into the head coaching position. Just throwing it out there. But yeah, I think, again, with head coaches and the coaching staff, it's lightning in a bottle. Can you catch it? Can you not? If you don't, because you're in a league that isn't, is good top to bottom, is it worth it? And you look around the SEC, right now, it doesn't look like there's going to be a single SEC coach fired after this year.
No.
The reality was people were thinking in the beginning of the year, Sam Pittman, scorching hot. Clark Lee at Vanderbilt, scorching hot. Then Brett Venables got hot, not to mention Billy Napier got hot, but they all seem to save their jobs. So there's continuity across the board when it comes to head coaches in the SEC right now.
And I think moving forward, you're going to see fewer coaches fired because of this revenue sharing. Because starting in April, that's a tentative date, but that's what we're told, you're going to be largely paying players up to a cap, and the cap is the same for all schools. So you're going to be paying them up to a cap, a certain amount. The NIL thing becomes less important. There'll still be some of that, but now it's your cap. You got to reach the cap. Okay, once you do that at Arkansas, where you've been deficient in money, now you're back up there with a lot of other people. So that makes it easier too. And that really starts to kick in. It may already be affecting this recruiting class. They may have looked ahead and said, we know what we're going to get from revenue sharing, so we can promise a little more to these freshmen. But where it will impact is after spring football, you've still got another portal class opening, and it may help you there. So they can go through spring, identify where they still have some issues, and then they've got money to go, okay, we're going to go after this guy, and then maybe you complete the process of what you need. I'm just very high on where they are. I've never thought Pittman was a goober, which a lot of people, well, they do. They think he's a good old guy, sits back and drinks an old cold one. Don't mistake the way he talks with him just being some clueless guy. He's a bottom line guy. I've seen him operate behind the scenes. I've talked to other people that know what he does, and he may come across as this friendly, but when he decides he's got to get something done, he's not, oh yeah, I'm going to get out of a cold one and try to figure this problem out. He's a lot smarter than the average fan thinks he is. He's had a few things he's had to deal with. The biggest one was that whole Dan Enos thing. And the problem there was, and you can go back to the year before, they almost had a 9-win season in 2022. What happened? It was that you didn't develop a backup quarterback that could help you win. This year, what did we see with Petrino?
Backup quarterback help you win?
They don't beat they don't win that Tennessee game without a backup quarterback that doesn't get you beat. But in 2022, KJ Jefferson missed 3 games completely. They lost all 3 of those games. And then in the 4th game, he played, but he hadn't worked out all week, and it wasn't sharp. So you didn't have a backup that could help you. You've transitioned past that now. Look at what they're going to have next year.
Yeah.
You're not going to be sitting there stuck with some guy, well, we thought he was a receiver, maybe more than a quarterback, because that's what they ended up with, a guy that they eventually turned into a wide receiver. But he was supposed to help you win games when KJ Jefferson got hurt. The combination of that, and that was more Kendall Briles than Sam Pittman, and then Briles leaves, and then you pick the wrong guy, Enos, because you let your agent tell you, oh, he's good and you can get him. And I think he learned his lesson on that. So I don't see him making those mistakes anymore.
Yeah, and it'll be fun to see how the rest of the class kind of comes down, what other news comes out today and in the next couple of weeks. Mike, before we go, let's have a little bit of fun. Arkansas 6-6. They're going to go bowling. Question is, where is it going to be? We'll find out officially this weekend. I believe we find out on Sunday. If it were up to you, where are you sending the 6-6 Hogs?
Well, here's what I think, and I could be absolutely wrong about this. But don't think that the bowls themselves don't have some pull in this. I don't think they just sit there and go, okay, give us who you want. And what do? They want a team in their bowl game, maybe two, but certainly one that can draw a crowd. That's why I like the Texas Bowl. First of all, there are Razorback fans that love to go to Texas from here. So they'll go down. But you got a lot of people from Dallas-Fort Worth that'll go down to Houston. You got people in the Houston area that'll go to that. I remember the last Texas Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
There was a huge number of fans. There are almost as many Texas as Longhorn fans. So that's something that now, what are the network people? Well, if you're going to put a game on, do you want an empty stadium? These are lower tier bowl games, but they're still on TV. You want some interest in that. Does it help when you flash on a pro stadium and there's nobody sitting there? So that's why I think they got a good shot to go to the Texas Bowl. But I understand there's only a couple of writers and organizations that have projected them in the Texas Bowl. Other people are saying Gasparilla or whatever.
I was going to say, so you like Texas Bowl, and that was my counterpoint was if you look at all the national rankings, look, all these guys are going to tell you something different. Some of them are right, some of them are wrong. Who knows? It's literally a crapshoot right now. Right now, if you look at all of them and kind of do the math, it's probably about 40-40-20, 40 to Texas Bowl, 40 to Birmingham Bowl, 20%. I've seen a few lately saying that Arkansas is going to go to the Gasparilla Bowl. Haven't seen a lot of Memphis so far this week. That's been really new, a big change of where the last couple of weeks we've seen a lot of them getting projected to Memphis. This week we have not. So it's really a crapshoot, right? Like you're 40, but I think it's 40-40-20, or 40-40-20 Birmingham, Texas, and Gasparilla Bowl.
I would agree with that.
So we'll see what happens. Should be fun. That'll be out this weekend. Mike, is there anything else that you want to mention about signing day before we go?
I just think, doom and gloom. You can do whatever you want. You can go on the internet and read that stuff and read some guy goes, the fan base is not going to tolerate this.
Yeah.
And I always click and see who said this. And then the guy's got 11 followers, but he speaks for the fan base. That's a little hilarious. But what I'm saying is, I don't care how many people appear to be against something, this is terrible, we're upset. If you look at the totality of the internet, I read it all. I read Facebook. I read all of the other tweets on Twitter where people don't say that stuff. And when you put it all together and then consider that most people probably don't even post on Twitter, or if they do, if they're even on Twitter, I just think the fan base is not as negative as you think it is right now. And when you get even people that are negative, they're looking for something positive. When Petrino got hired last year, people suddenly got excited again. Well, now you got a better recruiting class than you thought you did. And there's a little bit of mystery about all those people that are mad at Taylor Green. Well, man, you got a little mystery there.
Some merit there now.
Yeah. So there's just reasons to be kind of excited today instead of sitting around going, it's 14th, 15th in the SEC. I don't care about that.
Yeah, should be fun. Should be very fun. Continue to watch that. We'll have all those updates over on our social media in case you at home want to follow along, see what happens. We'll be updating you all this week, all throughout the Pig Trail Nation shows, your Pig Trail Nation reports, and the newscast. Not to mention, we'll break it all down this weekend on the Pig Trail Show. That should be a lot of fun. But that is going to do it for this week's PTN Extra. For Mike Irwin, I'm Evan Camigo. Thank you, as always, for tuning in, and we'll see you right back here next Wednesday on PTN Extra.